Okay, now let's see how elasticity affects tax incidence. Remember, tax incidence is just a reference to who's carrying or paying the burden of the tax, or what portion of the tax each party, buyer and seller, consumer, producer, is responsible for. Now, I just brought this up again. This is, what we used for our graph for an excise tax of $3. Again, this is with our demand and supply curves, of the same slope. But here we went back until the difference between the demand and the supply price was equal to $3. The difference between $6, the price that consumers pay, the demand price, is $3 greater than the supply price. So 6 minus 3 is equal to 3, the amount of the tax. And we saw how, in this particular case, both parties will share equally, paying exactly a half of the tax, because the old price was $4.50 at our equilibrium price. Now consumers pay $6, so $6 minus $4.50 is $1.50. And if we look at the sellers, they receive the supply price of $3 when they used to get $4.50. So $4.50 minus 3 is also $1.50. So here, they're sharing equally, but the fast and hard rule, which is, going to be applied throughout these examples I'm going to show you, is that whichever curve, supply or demand, is more inelastic, that is the person or the person who will carry the greatest burden. So I'll even show you the extreme cases of like a perfectly elastic and inelastic curves and things like that. But for now, we're just going to look at a situation where one curve or the other is just relatively more inelastic than the other. All right, so we're going to look here where we have, now I think you can see that the supply curve is steeper than it was before. And so our new equilibrium price is going to be up here at $6. And so when we impose this $3 excise tax, we go back until the difference between this demand and supply price is equal to $3. So that's going to be right here. Okay. So instead of paying $6, consumers are going to pay 7. So 7 minus 6 equals $1, and the supply price is $4. So instead of getting paid 6, they're only going to get 4. So their share or burden of the $3 tax is equal to 2. So this shows how a more inelastic, relatively more inelastic supply or demand curve is going to be the person or the side that bears the burden of the tax. A greater share of the $3 excise tax is borne by the sellers in this case, 2 out of the $3. Now, just to show you that it works both ways, I've replaced the supply with the original that we had, and now I've made demand more inelastic. It's more relatively steeper than supply, so we should see that now consumers or buyers bear a larger share of the $3 excise tax. So originally, now with our supply and demand curves like this, we have an equilibrium price of $3. Again, when we impose the $3 excise tax, we're going to go back from our equilibrium price until the difference between our demand price and our supply price is equal to that $3. So this is $1, $2, $3 difference. And so again, we can compare who's paying a larger share of this. The new demand price is $5. They used to pay $3, so $2 of the excise tax is going to be on consumers. And again, the sellers used to get $3. Now the supply price is $2, right off of the supply curve here. And so their portion or share of the burden of the excise tax is equal to $1. So again, the key is just which of the two curves is relatively more inelastic. They have a greater share of the tax burden. Now let's look at a couple of extreme cases with perfectly elastic and inelastic curves. Okay, so there's two situations when the consumer will pay the full amount, the full burden of the excise tax. One is when the demand curve is perfectly inelastic, because as we can see here at $5 we've got the equilibrium price, and if we try to go back between supply and demand until the difference between the supply and demand price is equal to $3, the demand curve is a vertical line. So the only thing we can do is just go up $1, $2, $3, and so that full burden of the tax falls upon, this is the $3 tax. Now consumers pay $8 instead of $5, so their burden is $3, and the sellers still get $5, and that means they pay zero, none of the tax at all. And this is the other situation when the consumer is going to pay the full amount or burden of this $3 excise tax. So originally we're at an equilibrium price of $5. So when we go back to find that $3 difference between this supply price and demand price, it happens when, again, the demand price is $8 and supply price remains the same at $5. So for consumers, they now have to pay $8 instead of the $5. They're paying the full $3 in tax. The sellers were getting $5 every time they sold. They still get $5, so they're paying zero. They're paying none of the excise tax. Okay, now as you might predict, we're going to look at when supply is perfectly inelastic, and now because it is relatively more inelastic than demand, in fact perfectly inelastic, we would expect now that the producer is going to bear the full burden of the tax. So let's say again that originally our equilibrium price is $5. When we try to move back between those two until the difference between the demand and supply price off of the demand and supply curves is equal to the size of the $3 excise tax, what we find is that we have to go down 1, 2, we have to just go straight down by $3 just down the length of the supply curve. So this is the amount that that the producers are now going to receive. So consumers used to pay $5. They still pay $5. I'm sorry, yeah, pay $5. So 5 minus 5 means they're paying no tax at all. And now it's that the sellers used to be paid $5, but now they're only getting paid $2. So the full burden of the tax has fallen on their shoulders. This is $3 right there. Okay. And then, of course, the last possibility is that demand if it's perfectly elastic, then also the full burden of the tax falls on to the sellers or producers. So last situation, again, here's our equilibrium price at $5. So if we are imposing that $3 excise tax, we have to go back until the difference between this demand price on our demand curve and the supply price on our supply curve is equal to $3. So that looks to be 1, 2, like about here. I didn't draw my curve perfectly, but here's the $3. And so consumers were paying $5. They're still paying $5. They pay none of the tax. Producers used to get $5. Now they're going to get paid only $2. So, oops, their share of the excise tax is 3. All right, so the best thing to remember is which curve is more inelastic. That will always tell you who bears the larger share of the burden. And then in the cases when demand is perfectly elastic or supply is perfectly inelastic, it's going to be the sellers that bear the full burden. And when supply is perfectly elastic or demand is perfectly inelastic, then that's when consumers will bear the full burden of the tax. That's it.